distinctly just now, when the shadows of the bones were whiter. I think that you may take it that the identification is beyond all doubt of question." "Yes," agreed Dr. Norbury with gloomy resignation. "It sounds, as you say, quite conclusive. Well, well, it is a most horrible affair. Poor old John Bellingham! It looks uncommonly as if he had met with foul play. Don't you think so?" "I do," replied Thorndyke. "There was a mark on the right side of the skull that looked rather like a fracture. It was not very clear, being at the side, but we must develop the negative to show it." Dr. Norbury drew his breath in sharply through his teeth. "This is a gruesome business, Doctor," said he. "A terrible business. Awkward for our people, too. By the way, what is our position in the matter? What steps ought we to take?" "You should give notice to the coroner. I will manage the police. And you should communicate with one of the executors of the will." "Mr. Jellicoe?" "No, not Mr. Jellicoe, under the peculiar circumstances. You had better write to Mr. Godfrey Bellingham." "But I rather understood that Mr. Hurst was the co-executor," said Dr. Norbury. "He is, surely, as matters stand," said Jervis. "Not at all," replied Thorndyke. "He was, as matters stood, but he is not now. You are forgetting the condition of Clause 2. That clause sets forth the conditions under which Godfrey Bellingham shall inherit the bulk of the estate and become the co-executor, and those conditions are that the body of the testator shall be deposited in some authorized place for the reception of the bodies of the dead, situate within the boundaries of, or appertaining to some place of worship within, the parish of St. George, Bloomsbury, and St. Giles in the Fields, or St. Andrew above the Bars, and St. George the Martyr. Now, Egyptian mummies are bodies of the dead, and this museum is an authorized place for their reception, and this building is situate within the boundaries of the parish of St. George, Bloomsbury. Therefore, the provisions of Clause 2 have been duly carried out, and therefore Godfrey Bellingham is the principal beneficiary under the will, and the co-executor, in accordance with the wishes of the testator. Is that quite clear?" "Perfectly," said Dr. Norbury, "and a most astonishing coincidence. But, my dear young lady, had you better not sit down? You are looking very ill." He glanced anxiously at Ruth, who was pale to the lips and was now leaning heavily on my arm. "I think, Berkeley," said Thorndyke, "you had better take Miss Bellingham out into the gallery where there is more air. This has been a tremendous climax to all the trials she has borne so bravely. Go out with Berkeley," he said gently, laying his hand on her shoulder, "and sit down while we develop the other negatives. You mustn't break down now, you know. When the storm has passed and the sun is beginning to shine." He held the door open, and as we passed out his face softened into a smile of infinite kindness. "You won't mind my locking you out," said he. "This is a photographic dark room at present." The key grated in the lock, and we turned away into the dim gallery. It was not quite dark, for a beam of moonlight filtered in here and there through the blinds that covered the skylights. We walked on slowly, her arm linked in mine, and for a while neither of us spoke. The great rooms were very silent and peaceful and solemn. The hush and the stillness, the mystery of the half-seen forms in the cases around, were all in harmony with the deeply felt sense of a great deliverance that filled our hearts. We had passed through into the next room before either of us broke the silence. Insensibly our hands had crept together, and as they met and clasped with mutual pressure, Ruth exclaimed, "How dreadful and tragic it is! Poor, poor Uncle John! It seems as if he had come back from the world of shadows to tell us of this awful thing. But, oh God, what a relief it is!" She caught her breath in one or two quick sobs and pressed my hand passionately. "It is over, dearest," I said. "It is gone forever. Nothing remains but the memory of your sorrow and your noble courage and patience." "I can't realize it yet," she murmured. "It has been like a frightful, interminable dream." "Let us put it away," said I, "and think only of the happy life that is opening." She made no reply, and only a quick catch in her breath, now and again, told of the long agony that she had endured with such heroic calm. We walked on slowly, scarcely disturbing the silence with our soft footfalls, through the wide doorway into the second room. The vague shapes of mummy cases standing erect in the wall cases loomed out dim and gigantic, silent watchers keeping their vigil with the memories of untold centuries locked in their shadowy breasts. They were an awesome company. Reverend survivors from a vanished world, they looked out from the gloom of their abiding place, but with no shade of menace or of malice in their silent presence. rather with a solemn benison on the fleeting creatures of today. Halfway along the room, a ghostly figure, somewhat aloof from its companions, showed a dim, pallid blotch where its face would have been. With one accord we halted before it. "Do you know who this is, Ruth?" I asked. "Of course I do," she answered. "It is Artemidorus." We stood, hand in hand, facing the mummy, letting our memories fill in the vague silhouette with its well-remembered details. Presently I drew her nearer to me and whispered, "Ruth, do you remember when we last stood here?" "As if I could ever forget!" she answered passionately. "Oh, Paul, the sorrow of it, the misery! How it wrung my heart to tell you! Were you very unhappy when I left you?" Unhappy! I never knew until then what real heart-breaking sorrow was. It seemed as if the light had gone out of my life forever. But there was just one little spot of brightness left. "What was that?" "You made me a promise, dear, a solemn promise, and I felt, at least I hoped, that the day would come, if I only waited patiently, when you would be able to redeem it." She crept closer to me, and yet closer, until her head nestled on my shoulder and her soft cheek lay against mine. "Dear heart," I whispered, "is it now? Is the time fulfilled?" "Yes, dearest," she murmured softly. "It is now and forever." Reverently I folded her in my arms, gathered her to the heart that worshipped her utterly. Henceforth no sorrows could hurt us, no misfortune vex, for we should walk hand in hand on our earthly pilgrimage and find the way all too short. Time, whose sands run out with such unequal swiftness for the just and the unjust, the happy and the wretched, lagged, no doubt, with the toilers in the room that we had left. But for us its golden grains trickled out apace, and left the glass empty before we had begun to mark their passage. The turning of a key and the opening of a door aroused us from our dream of perfect happiness. Ruth raised her head to listen, and our lips met for one brief moment. Then, with a silent greeting to the friend who had looked on our grief and witnessed our final happiness, we turned and retraced our steps quickly, filling the great empty rooms with chattering echoes. "We won't go back into the dark room, which isn't dark now," said Ruth. "Why not?" I asked. "Because when I came out I was very pale, and well, I don't think I am very pale now. Besides, poor Uncle John is in there, and I should be ashamed to look at him with my selfish heart overflowing with happiness." "You needn't be," said I. "It is the day of our lives, and we have a right to be happy. But you shan't go in if you don't wish to." And I accordingly steered her adroitly past the beam of light that streamed from the open door. "We have developed 4 negatives," said Thorndyke as he emerged with the others, "and I am leaving them in the custody of Dr. Norbury, who will sign each when they are dry, as they may have to be put in evidence. What are you going to do?" I looked at Ruth to see what she wished. "If you won't think me ungrateful," said she, "I should rather be alone with my father tonight. He is very weak and—" "Yes, I understand," I said hastily. And I did. Mr. Bellingham was a man of strong emotions and would probably be somewhat overcome by the sudden change of fortune and the news of his brother's tragic death. "In that case," said Thorndyke, "I will bespeak your services. Will you go on and wait for me at my chambers when you have seen Miss Bellingham home?" I agreed to this, and we set forth under the guidance of Dr. Norbury, who carried an electric lamp, to return by the way we had come, 2 of us at least in a vastly different frame of mind. The party broke up at the entrance gates, and as Thorndyke wished my companion good night, she held his hand and looked up in his face with swimming eyes. "I haven't thanked you, Dr. Thorndyke," she said, "and I don't feel that I ever can. What you have done for me and my father is beyond all thanks. You have saved his life, and you have rescued me from the most horrible ignominy. Good-bye, and God bless you." The hansom that bowled away eastward at most unnecessary speed bore 2 of the happiest human beings within the wide boundaries of the town. I looked at my companion as the lights of the street shone into the cab, and was astonished at the transformation. The pallor of her cheek had given place to a rosy pink. The hardness, the tension, the haggard self-repression that had aged her face were all gone, and the girlish sweetness that had so bewitched me in the early days of our love had stolen back. Even the dimple was there when the sweeping lashes lifted and her eyes met mine in a smile of infinite tenderness. Little was said on that brief journey. It was happiness enough to sit, hand clasped in hand, and know that our time of trial was past, that no cross of fate